स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, dosto, dear friends. Now, continuing the talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, I start this video with the talk number 63. A high officer asked, if juniors are promoted over oneself, the mind is perturbed. Will the enquiry, who am I, help the man to soothe the mind under such circumstances? Maharshi replies, yes, quite so. The enquiry, who am I, turns the mind inward and makes it calm. Devotee, I have faith in Murti Dhyana, worship of form. Will it not help me to gain jnana? Maharshi, surely it will. Upasana helps concentration of mind. Then the mind is free from other thoughts and is full of the meditated form. The mind becomes it and thus quite pure. Then think who is the worshipper. The answer is I, that is the self. So the self is gained ultimately. The present difficulty is that the man thinks that he is the doer, but it is a mistake. It is the higher power which does everything, and the man is only a tool. If he accepts that position, he is free from troubles. Otherwise, he quotes them. Take, for instance, the figure in a Gopuram temple tower, where it is made to appear to bear the burden of the tower on its shoulders. The posture and look are a picture of great strength while bearing the very heavy burden of the tower. But think, the tower is built on the earth and it rests on its foundations. The figure, like Atlas bearing the earth, is a part of the tower but is made to look as if it bore the tower. Is it not funny? So is the man who takes on himself the sense of doing. Then the Malayalam version of Buladu Narpadu was read out by a devotee for the benefit of the visitor. After hearing it, he asked, what about the reference to duality in practice and unity at the end? Maharshi, some people think that one must begin practice with the dualistic idea. It refers to them. They say that there is God, the man must worship and meditate. Ultimately, the jiva merges into God. Others say that the Supreme Being and the jiva are always apart and never merge into each other. However, it may be at the end. Let us not trouble ourselves about it now. All are agreed that the jiva is. Let the man find out the jiva, that is his self. Then there will be time to find out if the self should merge in the supreme, is a part thereof, or remains different from it. Let us not forestall the conclusion. Keep an open mind, dive within and find out the self. The truth will itself dawn upon you. Why should you determine beforehand if the finality is unity, absolute, or qualified, or duality? There is no meaning in it. The ascertainment is now made by logic and by intellect. The intellect derives light from the self, the higher power. How can the reflected and partial light of the intellect envisage the whole and the original light? The intellect cannot reach the self, and how can it ascertain its nature? Such is the significance of the reference, devotee. One of these stanzas says that the scriptures so scrupulously studied in the earlier stages are ultimately of no use. At what stage do they become useless, Maharshi? When their essence is realized, the scriptures are useful to indicate the existence of the higher power, the self, and the way to gain it. Their essence is that much only. When that is assimilated, the rest is useless. But they are voluminous, adapted to the development of the seeker. As one rising up in the scale finds the regions one has passed to be only steps to the higher stage, and so on. The steps ascended become purva paksha successively until the goal is gained. When the goal is reached, it remains alone and all the rest becomes useless. That is how the Shastras become useless. We read so much. Do we remember all that we read, but have we forgotten the essential? The essential soaks in the mind and the rest is forgotten. So it is with the Shastras. The fact is that the man considers himself limited and there arises the trouble. The idea is wrong. He can see it for himself. In sleep there was no world, no ego, no limited self, and no trouble. Something wakes up from the happy state and says, I. To that ego, the world appears. Being a speck in the world, he wants more and gets into trouble. How happy he was before the rising of the ego. Only the rise of the ego is the cause of the present trouble. Let him trace the ego to its source and he will reach that undifferentiated happy state which is sleepless sleep. The self remains ever the same here and now. There is nothing more to be gained because the limitations have wrongly been assumed. There is the need to transcend them. It is like the ten ignorant fools who forded a stream and on reaching the other shore counted themselves to be nine only. They grew anxious and grieved over the loss of the unknown tenth man. A wayfarer, on ascertaining the cause of their grief, counted them all and found them to be ten, but each one of them had counted the others, leaving himself out. The wayfarer gave each in succession a blow, telling them to count the blows. They counted ten and were satisfied. The moral is that the tenth man was not got anew. He was all along there, but ignorance caused grief to all of them. Again, a woman bore a necklace round her neck but forgot it. She began to search for it and made enquiries. A friend of hers, finding out what she was looking for, pointed out the necklace round the seeker's neck. She felt it with her hands and was happy. Did she get the necklace anew? Here again ignorance caused grief and knowledge happiness. Similarly also with the man and the self. There is nothing to be gained anew. Ignorance of the self is the cause of the present misery. Knowledge of the self brings about happiness. Moreover, if anything is to be got anew, it implies its previous absence. What remained once absent might vanish again, so there would be no permanency in salvation. Salvation is permanent because the self is here and now and eternal. Thus, the man's efforts are directed toward the removal of ignorance. Wisdom seems to dawn, though it is natural and ever present. The visitor, while taking leave, saluted the master and said, it is said that the victim in the tiger's mouth is gone forever. The reference is to a passage in Who Am I? where it is stated that a disciple can never revert to the world after he has once fallen into the field of the Guru's gracious look, as surely as the prey in the tiger's jaws cannot escape. Talk 64. News of someone's death was brought to Sri Bhagwan. He said, "Good, the dead are indeed happy. They have got rid of the troublesome overgrowth, the body. The dead man does not grieve. The survivors grieve for the man who is dead. Do men fear sleep? On the contrary, sleep is courted, and on waking up, every man says that he slept happily. Once one prepares the bed for sound sleep. Sleep is temporary death. Death is longer sleep. If the man dies while yet alive, he need not grieve over others' death. One's existence is evident with or without the body, as in waking, dream, and sleep. Then why should one desire continuance of the bodily shackles? Let the man find out his undying self and die and be immortal and happy. 13th July 1935. Talk number 65. A visitor. Is the Jagat world perceived even after self-realization? Maharshi, from whom is this question? Is it from a Jnani or from an Agyani? Devotee, from an Agyani. Maharshi, realize to whom the question arises. It can be answered if it arises after knowing the doubter. Can the Jagat or the body say that it is, or does the seer say that the Jagat or the body is? The seer must be there to see the objects. Find out the seer first. Why worry yourself now with what will be in the hereafter? Sri Bhagavan continued, what does it matter if the Jagat is perceived or not perceived? Have you lost anything by your perception of Jagat now? Or do you gain anything where there is no such perception in your deep sleep? It is immaterial whether the world is perceived or not perceived. The Agyani sees the Jnani active and is confounded. The Jagat is perceived by both, but their outlooks differ. Take the instance of the cinema. There are pictures moving on the screen. Go and hold them. What do you hold? It is only the screen. Let the pictures disappear. What remains over the screen again? So also here, even when the world appears, see to whom it appears. Hold the substratum of the eye. After the substratum is held, what does it matter if the world appears or disappears? The Agyani takes the world to be real, whereas the Jnani sees it only as the manifestation of the self. It is immaterial if the self manifests itself or ceases to do so. Talk 15th July 1935, talk number 66. A letter was received containing some learned questions pertaining to memory, sleep, and death. It looked at first sight that they were cogent yet baffling to answer, but when the master was approached on the subject, he disentangled the skein very nicely, pointing out that all such confusion was due to the non-differentiation of the real I from the false I. The attributes and modes pertain to the latter and not to the former. One's efforts are directed only to remove one's ignorance. Afterwards, they cease, and the real self is found to be always there. No effort is needed to remain as the self. 21st July 1935, talk number 67. A visitor, Mr. K.S.N. Iyer of the South Indian Railway said, there is a trifling halting place in my meditation when I ask myself, who am I? My reasoning proceeds as follows. I see my hand. Who sees it? My eye. How to see the eye in a mirror. Similarly, to see me, there must be a mirror which is to supply the place of the mirror in me, is my question. Maharshi, then why do you inquire who am I? Why do you say you are troubled and so on? You could as well remain quiet. Why do you rise out of your composure? Devotee, inquiring thus helps me to concentrate. Is concentration the only benefit? Maharshi, what more do you want? Concentration is the thing. What makes you come out of your quiet? Devotee, because I am drawn out. Mercy, inquiry of who am I means finding the source of I. When that is found, that which you seek is accomplished. The gist of Sri Bhagwan's words seem to be that one should make a concerted effort and not give it up baffled with a defeatist mentality. Talk number 68. Dr. Radha Kamal Mukherjee, a well-known professor, fair man of middle age, with a peaceful look, practicing yoga or meditation, has had some occult experiences and desires the mystery to be unraveled by the master. He has written a book and had it published by Messrs. Longmans, Greens and Company, London. He finds self-realization hard to attain and requires the master's help. His question, the Upanishadic, Upanishadic method of meditation has now disappeared. There was a great sage in Bengal who instructed me in it. After long years of discipline and practice, I am having some mystic experiences. I feel sometimes that Bhuma, supreme consciousness, is infinitude and that I am finite consciousness. Is that correct? Maharshi, Bhuma, perfection alone is. It is infinite. There arises from it this finite consciousness taking on an upadhi, limiting adjunct. This is abhasa or a reflection. Merge this individual consciousness into the Supreme One. That is what should be done. Devotee, Bhuma is an attribute of Supreme Consciousness, Maharshi. Bhuma is the supreme yatra, nanyat pashyati yatra, nanyat shrunoti sa bhuma. Where one does not see any other, hears nothing, it is perfection. It is indefinable and indescribable. It is as it is. Devotee, there is a vastness experienced. Probably it is just below Bhuma but close to it. Am I right? Maharshi, Bhuma alone is nothing else. It is the mind which says all this. Devotee, transcending the mind, I feel the vastness. Maharshi, yes, yes. The professor turned to the lady seated just a little further away from him and interpreted in Hindi to her. She, lady, what is the difference between meditation and distraction? Maharshi, no difference. When there are thoughts, it is distraction. When there are no thoughts, it is meditation. However, meditation is only practice as distinguished from the real state of peace. Lady, how to practice meditation? Maharshi, keep off thoughts. See, lady, how to reconcile work with meditation? Maharshi, who is the worker? Let him who works ask the question. You are always the self. You are not the mind. It is the mind which raises these questions. Work proceeds always in the presence of the self only. Work is no hindrance to realization. It is the mistaken identity of the worker that troubles one. Get rid of the false identity. The professor is not the state of non-consciousness close to In infinite consciousness, Maharshi, consciousness alone remains and nothing more. Devotee, Sri Bhagwan's silence is itself a powerful force. It brings about a certain peace of mind in us. Maharshi, silence is never ending speech. Vocal speech obstructs the other speech of the silence. In silence, one is in intimate contact with the surroundings. The silence of Dakshinamurti removed the doubts of the four sages. Mauna Vyakhya Prakritita Tattvam. Truth expounded by silence. Silence is said to be exposition. Silence is so potent. For vocal speech, organs of speech are necessary and they precede speech, but the other speech lies even beyond thought. It is, in short, transcendent speech or unspoken words. Para vak. Devotee. Is there knowledge in realization? Maharshi. Absence of knowledge is sleep. There is knowledge in realization, but this knowledge differs from the ordinary one of the relation of subject and object. A it is absolute knowledge. Knowledge has two meanings. Vachyartha, vritti, literal meaning. Lakshyartha, jnana, self, svarupa, secondary significance. Devotee, with vritti one sees knowledge. Maharshi, quite so. He also confounds vritti with knowledge. Vritti is a mode of mind. You are not the mind, you are beyond it. The lady, there is sometimes an irresistible desire to remain in Brahma Akara Vritti. Maharishi, it is good. It must be cultivated until it becomes sahaja, natural. Then it culminates as Svarupa, one's own self. Later, Sri Bhagwan explained Vritti is often mistaken for consciousness. It is only a phenomenon and operates in the region of abhasa, reflected consciousness. The knowledge lies beyond relative knowledge and ignorance. It is not in the shape of vritti. There are no subject and object in it. Vritti belongs to the rajasic, active mind. The sattvic mind is repose, is free from it. The sattvic is the witness of the rajasic. It is no doubt true consciousness. Still, it is called sattvic mind because the knowledge of being witness is the function of abhasa, reflected consciousness only. Mind is the abhasa. Such knowledge implies mind, but the mind is by itself inoperative. Therefore, it is called sattvic mind. Such is the Jivan Mukta's state. It is also said that his mind is dead. Is it not a paradox that a Jivan Mukta has mind and that it is dead? This has to be considered in argument with ignorant folk. It is also said that Brahma is only the Jivan Mukta's mind. How can one speak of him as Brahmavid, knower of Brahma? Brahma can never be an object to be known. This is, however, in accordance with common parlance. Sattvic mind is surmised of the Jivan Mukta and of Ishvara. Otherwise, they argue. How does the Jivan Mukta live and act? The Sattvic mind has to be admitted as a concession to argument. The Sattvic mind is in fact the absolute consciousness, the object to be witnessed, and the witness finally merges together, and absolute consciousness alone reigns supreme. It is not a state of sunne, blank, or ignorance. It is the Savrupa, real self. Some say that mind arises from consciousness followed by reflection abhasa. Others say that the abhasa, reflection, arises first followed by the mind. In fact, both are simultaneous. The professor asked Sri Bhagwan to extend his grace to him, although he would soon be thousand miles off. Sri Bhagwan said that time and space are only concepts of mind, but Sarupa, the real self, lies beyond mind, time, and space. Distance does not count in the self. The lady with him was most reluctant to leave the master and returned home. The master said, think that you are always in my presence. That will mistake you feel right. They left dusk. They left after dusk. Talk number 69. There were reports of the above said professors, university lecturers in the Hindu. The lecturer had emphasized the necessity for birth control and discussed the various possibilities of making the man feel his responsibility so that birth control might be automatic. The master, on hearing it, casually remarked, let them find out the method of dying. Here, death refers to that of the ego, Ahankar. 24th July 1935, talk number 70. Sri Raju Shastrigal asked Sri Bhagwan about Nada, Bindu, and Kala. Maharshi, they are in Vedanta terminology prana, mana, buddhi, the life, current, mind, and intellect. In the Tantras, Nada is said to be subtle sound with tejas, light in it. This light is said to be the body of Shiva. When it develops and sound is submerged, it becomes Bindu. To be full of light, Tejomaya is the aim. Kala is a part of the Bindu. Talk number 71. Chronological sequence of the master's stay in different places at Tiruvannamalai. 1896 arrived at Tiruvannamalai and stayed in the temple premises beneath the tree in the interior of the underground cellar Pathala Lingam, sometimes in the Gopurams, etc. 1897 early removed to Gopuram, stayed in the shrine and in the adjoining mango grove 18 months. 1898 September in Pavalakunru. 1899 February on the hill in caves, the Mango Tree Cave and Virupaksha Cave. 1905 stayed in Pachiamman Coil for 6 months during the plague ravages again on the hill. 1908 January, February and March in Pachiamman Coil again on the hill. 1916 Sakandasramam. 1922 the Ramanasramam site on the southern slope of the hill. 25th September 1935 talk number 72. Mr. K.S.N. Iyer, a railway officer, asked about Japa. Mercy, the utterance and then remembrance and later meditation are the successive stages finally ending in involuntary and eternal japa. The japakara, doer of japa of that kind is the self of all the japas. Who am I is the best. 27th September 1935, talk number 73. Mr. Eknatha Rao, the engineer, asked, what about the despondency of not obtaining any encouragement from the master, much less his grace? Mercy, it is ignorance only. The quest must be made as to who is despondent and so on. It is the phantom of the ego arising after sleep which falls prey to such thoughts. In deep sleep, the person was not afflicted. Who is afflicted now while awake? The sleep state is about the normal one. Let him search and find out. Devotee, but there is no incentive for want of encouragement. Maharshi, does not one find some kind of peace while in meditation? That is the sign of progress. That peace will be deeper and more prolonged with continued practice. It will also lead to the goal. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14. The final verses speak of Gunatita, one who has transcended the Gunas. That is the final stage. The earlier stages are Ashuddha Sattva, impure being, Misra Sattva, mixed being, and Suddha Sattva, pure being. Of these, the impure being is when overpowered by Rajas and Tamas. The mixed being is that state in which the being Sattva asserts itself spasmodically. The Suddha Sattva overpowers Rajas and Tamas. After these successive stages, there comes the state transcending gunas. Talk number 74. Mr. Friedman, the engineer, writes in one of his letters, Maharshi is with me not only when I think of him, but also when I am not thinking of him. Otherwise, how do I live? Talk number 75. Mr. Grant Duffy, formerly in a foreign embassy, writes, Pay my respect to Maharshi. He appears to me in my thoughts not only as an answer to my questions but also as presence. 29th September 1935. Talk number 76. Mr. K. S. N. Iyer said that he was not convinced how spiritual life could be reconciled to worldly activities. The master in answer cited some verses from Yoga Vasistha. The original is said to be millions of verses, of which only 32,000 stanzas are now found in the Sanskrit text. It was condensed to 6,000 and called Laghu Vasistha. The latter has been rendered in Tamil in 2050 stanzas. Devotee, without the mind concentrating on it, the work cannot be performed satisfactorily. How is the mind to be spiritually disposed and the work kept going as well? Maharshi, the mind is only a projection from the self, appearing in the waking state. In deep sleep, you do not say whose son you are, and so on. As soon as you wake up, you say you are so and recognize the world, and so on. The world is only lokaha, lokayate iti lokaha. What is perceived is the world. That which is seen is loka, or the world, which is the eye that sees it. That is the ego which rises and sinks periodically, but you exist always. Therefore, that which lies beyond the ego is consciousness, the self. In deep sleep, mind is merged and not destroyed. That which merges reappears. It may happen in meditation also, but the mind which is destroyed cannot reappear. The yogi's aim must be to destroy it and not to sink in laya. In the peace of dhyana, laya ensues, but it is not enough. It must be supplemented by other practices for destroying the mind. Some people have gone into samadhi with a trifling thought, and after a long time awakened in the trail of the same thought. In the meantime, generations have passed away in the world. Such a yogi has not destroyed his mind. Its destruction is the non recognition of it as being apart from the self. Every now even now, the mind is not. Recognize it. How can you do it if not in everyday activities? They go on automatically. Know that the mind promoting them is not real but a phantom proceeding from the self. That is how the mind is destroyed. Talk number 77. The Master, while referring to the Bible for be still and know that I am God, that is Psalm 46, found in the Ecclesiastes, There is one alone and there is no second, and the wise man's heart is at the right hand and a fool's heart is at the left. Talk number 78. A man from Masulla asked the master how to realize the self. Mercy, everyone has experience of the self every moment of his life. Devotee, but the self is not realized as one would like. Mercy, yes, the present experience is viparita, different from real. What is not is confounded with what is. Devotee, how to find the Atma? Maharshi, there is no investigation into the Atma. The investigation can only be into the non-self. Elimination of the non-self is alone possible. The self being always self-evident will shine forth of itself. The self is called by different names, Atma, God, Kundalini, Mantra, etc. How any one of them and the self becomes, hold any one of them and the self becomes manifest. God is no other than the self. Kundalini is now showing forth as the mind. When the mind is traced to its source, it is Kundalini. Mantra japa leads to elimination of other thoughts and to concentration on the mantra. The mantra finally merges into the self and shines forth as the self. Devotee, how long is a guru necessary for self realization? Maharshi, Guru is necessary so long as there is the Laghu, Pan or Guru, heavy, Laghu, light. Laghu is due to the self-imposed but wrong limitations of the self. God, on being worshipped, bestows steadiness, steadiness in devotion which leads to surrender. On the devotee surrendering, God shows His mercy by manifesting as the Guru. The Guru, otherwise God, guides and devotee, saying that God is in you and He is the Self. This leads to introversion of the mind and finally to realization. Efforts Effort is necessary up to the state of realization. Even then, the self should spontaneously become evident. Otherwise, happiness will not be complete. Up to that state of spontaneity, there must be effort in some form or another. Devotee, our work a day life is not compatible with such efforts. Maharshi. Why do you think that you are active? Take the gross example of your arrival here. You left home in a cart, took train, alighted at the railway station here, got into a cart there and found yourself in this ashramam. When asked, you say that you traveled here all the way from your town. Is it true? Is it not a fact that you remained as you were and there were moments of conveyance all along the way? Just as those moments are confounded with your own, so also the other activities. They are not your own, they are God's activities. Devotee, such idea will lead to blankness of mind and the work will not progress well. Mercy, go up to that blankness and tell me afterwards, devotee. They say that a visit to sages helps self-realization. Maharshi, yes, so it does. Devotee, will not my present visit to you bring it about? Maharshi, after a short pause, what is to be brought about? To whom? Consider, investigate. To whom is this doubt? If the source is traced, the doubt will disappear. Talk number 79. An engineer asked, the animals seem to conform to their own natural laws in spite of their environment and changes, whereas man flouts social law and is not bound by any definite system. He seems to be degenerating, whereas the animals are steady. Is it not so? Maharshi, after a long time, the Upanishads and scriptures say that human beings are only animals unless they are realized beings. Possibly they are worse also. 3rd October 1935, talk number 80. A very devoted and simple disciple had lost his only son, a child of 3 years. The next day he arrived at the ashram with his family. The master spoke with reference to them. Training of mind helps one to bear sorrows and bereavements with grace, but the loss of one's offspring is said to be the worst of all griefs. Grief exists only so long as one considers oneself to be of a definite form. If the form is transcended, one will know that the oneself is eternal. There is no death, no nor birth. That which is born is only the body. The body is the creation of the ego, but the ego is not ordinarily perceived without the body. It is always identified with the body. It is the thought which matters. Let the sensible man consider if he knew his body in deep sleep. Why does he feel it in the waking state? But although the body was not felt in sleep, did not the self exist then? How was he in deep sleep? How is he when awake? What is the difference? Ego rises up and that is waking. Simultaneously, thoughts arise. Let him find out to whom are the thoughts. Where from do they arise? They must spring up from the conscious self. Apprehending it even vaguely helps the extinction of the ego. Thereafter, the realization of the one infinite existence becomes possible. In that state, there are no individuals other than the eternal existence. Hence, there is no thought of death or wailing. If a man considers he is born, he cannot avoid the fear of death. Let him find out if he has been born or if the self has any birth. He will discover that the self always exists, that the body which is born resolves itself into the thought, and that the emergence of thought is the root of all mischief. Find where from thoughts emerge. Then you will abide in the ever present inmost self and be free from the idea of birth or the fear of death. A disciple asked how to do it. Maharshi, the thoughts are only vasanas, predispositions accumulated in innumerable births before. Their annihilation is the aim. The state free from vasanas is the primal state and eternal state of purity. Devotee, it is not clear yet. Maharshi, everyone is aware of the eternal self. He sees so many dying but still believes himself eternal because it is the truth. Unwillingly, the natural truth asserts itself. The man is deluded by the intermingling of the conscious self with the insentient body. This delusion must end. Devotee, how will it end? Maharshi, that which is born must end. The delusion is only concomitant, concomitant with the ego. It rises up and sinks, but the reality never rises nor sinks. It remains eternal. The master who has realized says so. The disciple hears, thinks over the words, and realizes the self. There are two ways of putting it. The ever present self needs no efforts to be realized. Realization is already there. Illusion alone is to be removed. Some say the word from the mouth of the master removes it instantaneously. Others say that the meditation, etc., are necessary for realization. Both are right, only the standpoints differ. Devotee, is dhyana necessary? Maharshi, the Upanishads say that even the earth is in eternal dhyana. Devotee, how does karma help it? Will it not add to the already heavy load to be removed? Maharshi, karma done unselfishly purifies the mind and helps to fix it in meditation. Devotee, what if one meditates incessantly without karma? Maharshi, try and see. The vasanas will not let you do it. Dhyana comes only step by step with the gradual weakening of the vasanas by the grace of the Master. 15th October 1935, talk number 81. Mr. Bernhard Bay, an American chemist who had interested himself in Vedanta for the last 20 years, now in India, came on a visit to the master. He asked, how is Abhyasa to be made? I am trying to find the light. He himself explained Abhyasa as concentration, one pointedness of mind. The master asked, what was his Abhyasa till now? The visitor said he concentrated on the nasal base, but his mind wandered. Maharshi, is there a mind? Another devotee gently put in. The mind is only a collection of thoughts. Maharshi, to whom are the thoughts? If you try to locate the mind vanishes and the self alone remains. Being alone, there can be no one pointedness or otherwise. Devotee, it is so difficult to understand this. If something concrete is said, it can be readily grasped. Japa, dhyana, etc. are more concrete. Mercy, who am I, is the best japa. What could be more concrete than the self? It is within each one's experience every moment. Why should he try to catch anything outside, leaving out the self? Let each one try to find out the known self instead of searching for the unknown something beyond. Devotee, where shall I meditate on the Atma? I mean, in which part of the body? Maharshi, the self should manifest itself. That is all that is wanted. A devotee gently added, on the right of the chest there is the heart, the seat of the Atma. Another devotee, the illumination is in that center when the self is realized. Mercy, quite so. Devotee, how to turn the mind away from the world? Mercy, is there the world? I mean, apart from the self, does the world say that it exists? It is you who say that there is a world. Find out the self who says it. 16th October 1935, talk number 82. A question was raised about the differences in the various samadhis. Maharshi, when the senses are merged in darkness, it is deep sleep. When merged in light, it is samadhi. Just as a passenger when asleep in a carriage is unaware of the motion, the halting or the unharnessing of the horses, so also a jnani in Sahaja Samadhi is unaware of happenings, waking, dream, and deep sleep. Here, sleep corresponds to the unharnessing of the horses, and Samadhi corresponds to the halting of the horses because the senses are ready to act just as the horses are ready to move after halting. In Samadhi, the head does not bend down because the senses are there, though inactive, whereas the head bends down in sleep because the senses are merged in darkness. In Kevla Samadhi, the activities, vital and mental, waking, dream, and sleep, are only merged, ready to merge after regaining the state other than samadhi. In Sehja Samadhi, the activities, vital and mental, and three states are destroyed, never to reappear. How others notice the jnani active, for example, eating, talking, moving, etc. He is not himself aware of these activities, whereas others are aware of his activities. They pertain to his body and not to his real self, Savrupa. For himself, he is like the sleeping passenger or like a child interrupted from sound sleep and fed being unaware of it. The child says the next day that he did not take milk at all and that he went to sleep without it. Even when reminded, he cannot be convinced, so also is Saja Samadhi. Susmana Parelina. Here Susmana refers to Tapo Mars, whereas the Paranadi refers to Jnana Marga. Talk number 83. The master relating some stories of the Bhaktas told how Sri Krishna served Eknath for 12 years, how Panduranga relieved Sakkubai from her home prison and enabled her to visit Pandharpur. Then he recollected the appearance of a mysterious Maulvi on his way from Madurai to Tiruvannamalai in 1896. How he appeared, spoke, and disappeared suddenly. Talk 84. Mr. Grant Duff asked the master if any mongoose had anything to do with him. The master said, yes, it was the occasion of Ardra and Jayanti. I was living up the hill in Sakandasramam. Streams of visitors were climbing up the hill from the town. A mongoose larger than the ordinary size of golden hue, not grey as a mongoose is, with no back spot on its tail, as is usual with wild mongoose, passed these crowds fearlessly. People took it to be a tame one belonging to someone in the crowd. The animal went straight to Palani Swami, who was having a bath in the spring by the Virupaksa cave. He stroked the creature and petted it. It followed him into the cave, inspected every nook and corner, and left the place and joined the crowd to pass up to Sakandasramam. I noticed it. Everyone was struck by its attractive appearance and its fearless movements. It came up to me, got on my lap, and rested there some time. Then it raised itself up, looked about, and moved down. It went round the whole place, and I followed it lest it should be harmed by the unwary visitors or by peacocks. Two peacocks of the place looked at it inquisitively, whereas the mongoose moved nonchalantly from place to place and finally disappeared into the rocks on the southeast of the ashramam. Talk number 85. The same gentleman asked the master about the material relation between memory and will and their relation to the mind. Maharshi, they are functions of the mind. The mind is the outcome of the ego, and the ego is from the self. 6th November 1935, talk number 86. The Master gave the true significance of the Christian faith thus. Christ is the ego, the cross is the body. When the ego is crucified and it perishes, what survives is the absolute being God. I am I and my Father are one, and this glorious survival is called resurrection. Talk 87. Major A. W. Chadwick, an ardent English devotee, asked, why did Jesus call out, my God, while being crucified? Mercy, it might have been an intercession on behalf of the two thieves who were crucified with him. Again, a Jnani has attained liberation even while alive, here and now. It is immaterial as to how, where, and when he leaves his body. Some jnanis may appear to suffer, others may be in samadhi, still others may disappear from sight before death. But that makes no difference to their jnana. Such suffering is apparent only to the onlooker and not to the jnani, for he has already transcended the mistaken identity of the self with the body. Talk number 88. The same gentleman asked, what is the significance of Christ in the illumination of Saint Paul? Maharshi, illumination is absolute, not associated with the forms. After Saint Paul became self-conscious, he identified the illumination with Christ consciousness devotee. But Paul was not a lover of Christ then. Mercy, love or hatred is immaterial. The thought of Christ was there. It is similar to Ramana's case. Christ consciousness and self realization are all the same. Talk number 89. Maharshi. Karpura Arti is symbolic of the burning away of the mind by the light of illumination. Vibhuti, sacred ashes, is Shiva, absolute being. And Kumkum, vermilion powder, is Shakti, consciousness. Vibhuti is of two types, two kinds, Paravibhuti and Aparavibhuti. The sacred ashes are of the latter classes. The para is what remains over after all the dross has been burnt away by the fire of realization. It is absolute being. Talk number 90. Again the Trinity was explained. God the Father represents Ishvara. God the Holy Spirit represents Atma. God the Son represents Guru. ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्ति भेदा विभागिने व्योमवाद व्यापता देह्या dakshinaani murtaye namaha, meaning that God appears to his devotee in the form of a Guru, Son of God, and points out to him the immanence of the Holy Spirit. That is to say that God is a spirit, that this spirit is immanent everywhere, and that the self must be realized, which is the same as realizing God. Talk number 91. A Bengali visitor asked, how is the mind controlled? Maharshi, what do you call the mind? Devotee, when I sit down to think of God, thoughts wander away to other objects. I want to control those thoughts. Maharshi, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that it is the nature of the mind to wander. One must bring one's thoughts to bear on God. By long practice, the mind is controlled and made steady. The wavering of the mind is a weakness arising from the dissipation of the energy in the shape of thoughts. When one makes the mind stick to one thought, the energy is conserved and the mind becomes stronger. Devotee, what is the meaning of the strength of the mind? Mercy, its ability to concentrate on one thought without being distracted. Devotee, how is that achieved? Mercy, by practice, a devotee concentrates on God, a seeker, follower of the Jnana Marga seeks the self. The practice is equally difficult for both. Devotee, even if the mind is brought to bear on the search for the self, after a long struggle, the mind begins to elude him, and the man is not aware of the mischief until after some time. Mercy, so it would be. In the early stage, Maharshi, so it would be. In the earlier stages, the mind reverts to the search at long intervals. With continued practice, it reverts at shorter intervals until finally it does not wander at all. It is then that the dormant Shakti manifests. The sattvic mind is free from thoughts, whereas the rajasic mind is full of them. The sattvic mind resolves itself into the life current. Devotee, can one keep the mind away from entering into the phase of thoughts before one experiences the current? Mercy, yes, the current is pre-existent. 7th November 1935, talk number 92. A visitor said, some say that one should practice meditation on gross objects only. It may be disastrous if one constantly seeks to kill the mind. Mercy, for whom it is disastrous. Can there be disaster apart from the self? Unbroken I is the ocean infinite, the ego. I thought remains only a bubble on it and is called Jiva, that is individual soul. The bubble too is water. When it bursts, it only mixes in the ocean. When it remains a bubble, it is still a part of the ocean. Ignorant of this simple truth, innumerable methods under different denominations such as yoga, bhakti, karma, each again with many modifications are being taught with great skill and in intricate detail only to entice the seekers and confuse their minds. So also are the religions and sects and dogmas. What are they all for? Only for knowing the self. They are aids and practices required for knowing the self. Objects conceived by the senses are spoken of as immediate knowledge, pratyaksha. Can anything be as direct as the self, always experienced without the aid of the senses? Sense perceptions can only be indirect knowledge and not direct knowledge. Only one's own awareness is direct knowledge, as is the common experience of one and all. No aids are needed to know one's own self, that is to be aware. The one infinite unbroken whole, plenum, becomes aware of itself as I. This is the original name. All other names, for example, Om, are little growths. Liberation is only to remain aware of the self. The Mahavakya, I am Brahma, is its authority. Though the I is always experienced, yet one's attention has to be drawn to it. Only then does knowledge dawn. Thus, the need for the instruction of the Upanishads and of wise sages. 9th November 1935, talk number 93. All are aware of their own self only. Wonder of wonders, they take what is not as what it is, or they see the phenomenon apart from the self. Only so long as there is the knower is there knowledge of all kinds, directed, inferential, intellectual, etc. Should the knower vanish, they all vanish together with him. Their validity is of the same degree as his. Talk number 94. A man prayed to the master to pardon him his sins. He was told that it would be enough if he took care to see that his mind did not trouble him. 13th November 1935, talk number 95. A question was raised as follows by Major A. W. Chadwick. Mr. Edward Carpenter, a certain mystic, has written in a book that he had self-realization on some occasions and that its effects lasted sometimes afterwards only to be gradually lost. Whereas Sri Ramana Gita says, Granthi, note, bondage, snapped once is snapped forever. In the case of this mystic, the bondage seems to have persisted even after self-realization. How can it be so? The master cited Kaivalya as follows. The disciple, after realizing the all-shining, unitary, unbroken state of being, knowledge, bliss, surrendered himself to the master and humbly prayed to know how he could realize the master's grace. The master said, my reward consists in your permanent unbroken bliss. Do not slip away from it, devotee. Having once experienced the supreme bliss, how can one stray stray away from it. Master, oh yes, it happens. The predisposition adhering to him from time immemorial will draw him out, and so ignorance overtakes him. Devotee, what are the obstacles to remaining steady in unbroken bliss? How can they be overcome? Mercy, the obstacles are number one, ignorance, which is forgetfulness of one's pure being. Number two, doubt, which consists in wondering if even the experience was of the real or of the unreal. Third, error, which consists in the I am the body idea and thinking that the world is real. These are overcome by hearing the truth, reflection on it, and concentration. The master continued. Experience is said to be temporary or permanent. The first experience is temporary, and by concentration, it can become permanent. In the former, the bondage is not completely destroyed, it remains subtle and reasserts itself in due course, but in the later, it is destroyed, root and branch, never to appear again. The expression Vagbhrashta, Yoga Bhrashta, those who have fallen down from yoga in Srimad Bhagavata Gita refer to former class of man. Devotee is then hearing the truth meant only for a limited few. Mercy, it is of two kinds. The ordinary one is to hear it enunciated and explained by a master. However, the right one is to raise the question for oneself and seek and find the answer in oneself as the unbroken I. To be reflecting on this experience is the second stage. To remain one pointed in it is the third stage. Devotee, can the temporary experience be called samadhi? Mercy, no, it forms part of the third stage. Devotee, it looks then as if even hearing the truth is limited to a very few. Maharshi, the seekers fall into the two classes. Kirtopaska and Akirtopaska, the former having already overcome his predisposition by steady devotion. His mind thus made pure has had some kind of experience but does not comprehend it. As soon as he is instructed by a competent master, permanent experience results. The other class of seeker needs great effort to achieve this, and how will he how will the hearing of the truth, reflection and concentration help him? The they comprise upasana, the nearest approach to truth, and will end in his self-realization. The fourth stage is the final one of liberation. Even there, some distinction is made according to the degree as number one, the knower of the Brahmavid. Number two, Brahmavid Varara. Third, Brahmavid Varya. Fourth, Brahmavid Varishtha. But all of them are in fact liberated even while alive. So here I end the fourth video. Thank you, my dear friends. Next video will start with the talk number 96. So thank you for listening this talk. Please, please like, share and comment the video and subscribe my channel. Thank you a lot, my dear friend. Thanks a lot. Namaste, namaste, namaste.